Hey, Wayne here. I'm dropping episode 4 of a 5-part crime series, and I'd like to say viewer discretion is strongly advised. This is definitely an adult series. You don't want your kids watching it, but I'm going to get out of here and let you all watch it in peace. Bye.
For more than a month, law officers in Central Texas hunt for twice-parole serial killer Kenneth McDuff. Their search leads them to Bloom's Motel, a run-down dump of a place where a lot of ex-cons live. And one of its residents is Alva Hank Worley, the running mate, the buddy of Kenneth McDuff. Worley has reached out to Sheriff's investigator Tim Steglich, and what he has to say is about to blow the case wide open.
Hank needed someone to talk to. Hank was having a hard time sleeping. The demons were coming out, so to speak.
Maybe because he had his daughter staying with him at the time and his conscience got to him.
Tim had spoken with Hank, knew him, so Tim was the guy. He's the one that made it all happen.
That moment when Hank Worley told me he was with McDuff when the woman was abducted has always stuck in my mind. I said, Hank, you need to stop talking. He said, can I go tell my daughter goodbye? Hank knew that he may be going to prison for a very long time. And I think he wanted to tell her that he might not be back.
Steglich took him back to the Bell County Sheriff's Department, took him into a room and began to talk to him. And took the first statements.
Even though Tim was angry about the murders, the girls, the rape, Tim was able to get his personal feelings, put them aside, and knew the bigger picture.
I needed to maintain my composure because I knew it was going to be a very long night and probably a long month and longer than that. Hank Worley was confessing to the car wash kidnapping.
My name is Alva Hank Worley. I'm 34 years of age.
What was unusual about this, you had the great white shark of serial killers, Kenneth McDuff, but he had an accomplice.
Back in December, about 2 or 3 days after Christmas, Kenneth McDuff picked me up at my sister's house.
You have a first-hand account of how one of these guys operates and what he does to his victims, and you rarely ever get anything like that. And when you see it and hear it, it's unthinkable. It is unthinkable acts.
We decided to go to Austin and get some coke or crank. The only place I knew to get that was near the university.
Hank Worley was very jumpy. He was not able to sit still, especially when he started detailing the abduction.
McDuff drove downtown instead of going to the campus. I did not ask him why. Mac drove down 6th Street and he drove around the car wash. That is near 6th. He drove around the car wash twice. I noticed someone washing their car in one of those bays. This was the only person at the car wash. Mike pulled into one of the bays facing the main road. I thought he was going to wash the car and get rid of the empty beer bottles. Mike did not say anything. He just got out of the car, walked over to the next stall where the only person was at the car wash. I heard his voice, but I could not hear what he said. Immediately after I heard his voice, Mike came back. And he had a girl by the throat. And her hands behind her back.
He did have the biggest hands I have ever seen on a human being.
I could hear her gurgling and she was pleading with him. She was saying, "Please, not me, not me."
McDuff used one of his hands to grab her by the head and lift her off of the pavement.
She was kicking back, but her feet were off the ground.
And I can only imagine what it must have been like for Colleen to have gone through such a thing.
He had left the driver's side door open and he carried her to that side of the car. He was having trouble getting her in the back seat. And I'm not sure if I helped him put her into the car, but I might have. She was saying, "Please let me go. Please don't let this happen to me." Mike told me to hold her. I got in the back seat, I held her wrists and pushed her against the side of the car. As we left the parking lot of the car wash, Mike went the wrong way on the street that runs in front of the car wash. She was telling me not to let him hurt her.
Worley was like a chihuahua on meth. And so I kept everything very simple. I talked to him directly, but not threatening. And that seemed to work with Hank.
Tim put his arm on him and just gave him a good squeeze, which made Worley feel, I have a cohort here, and he dropped his guard even more so.
Mike kept north on the interstate till about Round Rock and pulled over on the shoulder of the interstate. He got into the back seat with the kid and he told me to drive. Mike hit her several times in the head when he first got in with her in the back seat. He took off all his clothes. I think he laid her down and got on top of her. She scratched Mac's eyes. He said she tried to hurt me real bad. He slapped her and she said, "Okay, okay." Mac tied her hands behind her. He used a white string or cord. He lit a cigarette and he put it on her and in her. She made a real agonizing moan when he did that. He made some threat to her about not acting right.
I'm trying to get it out, but I'm really having a hard time believing that anyone would be that brutal. McDuff burned Colleen Reed on the genitals. That really set me off. I couldn't believe anybody could do something like that. And I knew that Hank was probably telling the truth, and I needed to keep rolling as fast as I could and as accurately as I could, because he probably wouldn't make something like that up.
Mike told me he is going to use her up. He then said he was going to get rid of the girl. This surprised me. Mike told me to watch where in the hell I was going, and I swerved. I pulled over on the service road just north of Amity, and Mike told me to get in the back. I did this and Mike drove. I tried to settle the girl down, and she told me to stay in there in the back to keep Mac away from her.
Colleen Reed begged Worley to help her be protected from McDuff. I think that Worley was not quite as violent with her, if he was violent at all, and she thought if there was a chance that this man can help me.
At what point should Worley say, hey, let's stop this and let's not torture this young lady? He wanted to be involved as much as McDuff did, or he would have done something. He was looking for enjoyment himself.
I took off all of my clothes. I finished having sex with her by the time we got to Belton, and I had my clothes back on by the time we got to 6th Street exit. Mac drove north on Highway 317, several miles. He turned to the right on a gravel road. He told me it was the old road that ran to his daddy's house. I stayed in the back seat with her. She stayed pretty calm with me back there with her.
Hank starts painting himself as the savior at that time. You know, I told her, just don't worry, I'm gonna take care of you, I won't hurt you, don't worry about it.
Worley was a follower, a drunk, a lost soul. He was there, and he allowed this to happen.
He could have gotten out of that car. He could have done something as a human to try to help Colleen survive. I mean, but he didn't.
He could have called the police. He could have done any number of things.
And so he really deflected all responsibility for what happened that night to McDuff.
He was weak. He was just a weak guy. He wanted to run with the big dogs, and then when he got through with the big dogs, he wished he had never seen a big dog.
Mac got out and reached in the car and grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out. He didn't say anything. He put her on her knees. He pulled his pants down to about his knees. And I'm not sure, but I think she did something to make him mad. He said, "I'll kill you, bitch." He pulled his hand all the way back behind himself. And he hit her so hard I could hear a loud crack. It almost sounded like a big tree breaking. And I'm sure she broke her neck. She didn't move at all. Her whole body was limp. I think she was dead at that point.
You just can't imagine that kind of brutality. To be choked and raped and beaten. She had, you know, no way of fighting somebody of that strength and that size and that evil.
I had been standing at the back of the car on the driver's side. Mac was out of control. I could not believe what he had done. I told him he should have let her go. He reached back in the car and got a cigarette and my lighter. He had a good fire on the end of it, and he put it in her. He did that 3 or 4 times. She did not move or scream. Every time he did that, he'd take a hit off of the cigarette to get a good fire on the end of it. The last time he put the cigarette in her, I did not see the cigarette after that. Mike picked her up by the hair and walked over to the trunk and put her in it. She did not make any noise at all. Mike told me we were in this together and I'd better keep my goddamn mouth shut. All the way back to my sister's house, I did not hear any noise from the trunk or the back of the car. Then he said he needed a shovel to get rid of her. I knew he was gonna bury her.
I had never heard anything like that before. This investigation was so intense, I wanted to get this thing done, get McDuff into custody, and make sure that these people cannot do it again.
After we heard Worley tell what happened, you never got past that. No one did. The thing about McDuff that we now know with horrible detail, the worst part of being grabbed by McDuff is not being killed by McDuff. That's where it leads, but the inevitability of it, forerun by torture, is what, to me, set McDuff apart. It remains the worst thing I've ever heard one human do to another, and it's the most horrifying, nightmarish thing I've ever heard.
To hear that kind of torture, it really shakes you to the core.
Sonia is the one who broke some very bad news to me. She had to tell me what happened. And I would often just shut her down and just say, I can't hear it. I can't digest it. And I sure don't know how I'm going to tell my parents.
Lori knew at that time that Colleen was not alive. There was a glimmer of hope, and after she heard that from Hank Worley, his words, she knew her sister was gone.
Worley believed McDuff dumped Colleen's body in a field near his parents' home. Police search the area and find nothing.
But some of the details of Worley's confession leak out to the media in Austin.
There's still some argument about who was responsible for that at the Austin Police Department. We were appropriately shocked.
Hank Worley told how he and McDuff went to Austin to buy drugs, kidnapped 29-year-old Colleen Reed. Both Worley and McDuff raped her. Worley said they eventually ended up here on Texas 317 north of Belton. According to Worley, he knew the woman was destined to die when McDuff said he was going to use her up. The search ended Saturday morning. No body found here.
Kenneth McDuff is on the loose. There didn't seem to be an effort to prepare the general public for the sheer terror of this story. It just came out.
The outrages, over the top. People are calling on the governor to do something. How is this man out of prison? How could this happen? And now Ann Richards, who certainly didn't come in on a law and order agenda or anything, she is really feeling the heat that something's got to be done.
Suddenly we are confronted with the fact that someone accused of kidnapping and murder was released from the penitentiary. In our minds, should never have been released.
In late April, a few days after Hank Worley's blood-chilling confession, another body shows up. A fisherman hooks a corpse in a flooded gravel pit in southern Dallas County, about 60 miles from Waco.
Last night, police found the body in this southeast Dallas County gravel pit.
Two fishermen walked up and
saw what they thought was a body submerged in the water right here. The back was on the surface, floating face down.
When he put his boat in, he went down a little channel where the river Willers was on each side, and he got about 30 foot, and he seen his body laying there.
The immediate suspicion is that it's Melissa Northrup, the pregnant mother of 2 young children who had been abducted from the convenience store in Waco at Quick Pack because her car had been found abandoned about 2 miles away. But it would be the next day until she was formally identified.
We do have a positive identification on the body. It is that of Melissa Ann Northrup.
Melissa Northrup's body had been in the water for a long time, so it was really difficult in forensics to determine what had happened to her. But it must have been a horrific ending for her life because McDuff was in to see his victims suffer. There were ligatures on her wrist and on her ankles tied with shoestrings in the same manner that inmates are known to use in murders. John Moriarty, the prison investigator, when he saw that, he thought, that's McDuff's signature. This is his doing. So that just sent a wave of anger through Waco.
There's no reason he should be out. If he was given life, why is he out? My daughter is 22 years old. To me, that wasn't her fulfillment of life at 22.
Hurts. But you know, I'm kind of relieved. I know she's not out there. She's not hurting. She's it's over.
You see things on TV that happen to people, but you never dream about it happening to you.
The horrible murders were so terrible that everybody, whatever gear they were in, they found another gear. There had been many people, many officers who had talked to different people throughout the case. McDuff's family, McDuff's acquaintances, people he ran with, people he used to know. Nothing was turning up that he was there. We thought he might be there, but it didn't look like it.
He was gone. No sign of him. We're taking the perspective maybe he already skipped out of Texas.
And the marshals got substantially involved at a national level. The Marshal Service at that time had developed a wonderful relationship with a couple of national programs that helped catch fugitives.
So it was our decision that we contacted American Most Wanted.
On May 1st, Texas lawmen asked for your help in finding Kenneth McDuff when we profiled his case on America's Most Wanted.
The families of those murder victims pray for the capture of McDuff. Tonight, your call could end the manhunt.
On May 1st, America's Most Wanted broadcast a report about the nationwide manhunt for Kenneth McDuff, talking about his victims. His mugshot and pictures are in there. 2 days later, an employee of a sanitation company calls local police in Kansas City and says, the man in the report, Kenneth McDuff, resembles somebody that works on one of the trash trucks here. That man is going by the name of Richard Fowler.
Sergeant J.D. Johnson is a Kansas City patrolman. He checked records and discovered police arrested Fowler less than a month ago for soliciting a prostitute in Kansas City's red light district.
It's a misdemeanor, slap on the wrist, but they took fingerprints.
So, Johnson, with the help of our hotline, contacted Deputy Richard Straub in Waco, Texas. Straub faxed McDuff's fingerprints back to Kansas City.
We were working like dogs around the clock, and we had nothing to indicate that he was in Kansas City. You know, it was kind of out of the blue.
The prints for Richard Fowler came in. As we look at the fingerprints and comparing them to McDuff, it was, my God, here he is.
there was no doubt it was him.
The party McDuff and the party Fowler were in fact the same party.
It's not done till he's in handcuffs. It's not done till he's behind bars. But there was a good feeling to know that finally we got a break. We got him.
He was living in a kind of a rooming house, an old house, and I think his roommate was another murderer. And he said McDuff was crazy. Told one of the investigators he thought McDuff was crazy.
Sergeant Johnson knew McDuff worked as a trash collector, so he and 5 other officers set a trap to haul McDuff in.
We knew that the trash truck would have to pass by this area on the way to the landfill.
Okay, now, McDuff's considered armed and dangerous. He's been on death row. They're expecting possible shootout, resistance, what have you.
We used the ruse of a commercial enforcement vehicle to get McDuff stopped without having to use red lights and siren. That way we totally surprised him. There was no opportunity at all for him to become aggressive.
And McDuff gives up immediately. There's no resistance. He gives up.
And that's what did McDuff in by getting the job, by exposing, lifting his head up. He needed his beer, he needed his drugs, and he needed a place to sleep and eat. If he would have just stayed low and depended on everybody else fending for him, it would have been a little rougher.
There's something congruent about that, in my opinion, that he ended up being arrested while picking up garbage.
And once he's taken into custody, the Marshal Service scrambles one of its jets to go to Waco to pick up the key investigators in the case. They all board this jet and they head to Kansas City.
The nationwide manhunt is over. A Texas parolee wanted for questioning in a string of murders is now under arrest.
Tonight, the people in this Central Texas community are relieved that McDuff is behind bars.
Thank God. Just thank God nobody else can be hurt. Because there's a lot of mothers out there, they're looking for their daughters. And I know how they feel, you know. And I pray for them, I do.
We are all very, very happy that this person has been taken off the streets. He can go and kill no more.
U.S. Marshals led a massive 7-week manhunt for McDuff.
All of us here are husbands. We have wives, we have daughters, we have sons. It's a relief that this man is not out there doing what he's suspected of doing.
So the next morning, they bring him back to Waco.
It was odd being on the plane with him because we had heard the details of the bad things he'd done, and now seeing in the flesh the creature that did these things, it was like seeing a grotesque monster.
The U.S. Marshal, Parnell McNamara, is sitting on the jet, and he's staring at McDuff. But he said for a split second, I wanted to kill him myself. I'm gonna throw that door open, I'm gonna throw him out at 35,000 feet. Who will care? And then he came back to his senses.
We had to regroup, and I had to explain to everybody that was still working on the team, our job has changed. No matter what we think and no matter what we feel, this man now has to be protected. It's our obligation to make sure he's safe.
A U.S. Marshal Service jet returned suspected serial killer Kenneth McDuff to Waco under heavy security.
All of the media are there, newspapers, radio. It is a huge media gaggle and event. I mean, there are cameras everywhere, and it's a big, big story.
Then when the door opened off the plane, my thought was, good Lord, be ready, because I hope that there was no one out there with a high-powered rifle.
The 46-year-old parole killer of 3 Fort Worth teenagers in 1966 wore chains and leg irons. Authorities want to question McDuff about the abductions and murders of a dozen Texas women.
McDuff looks a little gaunt and thin. He's wearing a white t-shirt. He's wearing Green Army fatigue pants. and he comes walking beside me.
Did you kill anyone, Mr. McDuff?
Law.
Did you know Melissa Northrup?
Snarled at me and said, no. And he gets into one of the patrol cars, then they certainly didn't want this guy to get away again.
He was a big man. He was a strong man. He was a coward. McDuff was a coward. He wouldn't fight me, but he would go after desperate women, young women that were weaker. McDuff was nothing but a predator. And when you put him in a corner with someone that's gonna whip his ass, he's a coward. Simple as that.
Meanwhile, downtown on the lawn of the federal courthouse, where McDuff is going to be taken, hundreds of people have gathered. The Marshal Service is receiving intelligence that he's going to be killed before he gets there, that there's such anger in the community. They're going to try to take him from the marshals and kill him. And so there's heavy, heavy security. I grab my camera crew and literally speed a back way to the federal courthouse, and I've arrived there before they're to get there. And I'm standing in the middle of Melissa Northrup's relatives, sister-in-laws and sisters. When that door opens and McDuff steps out with those officers, the crowd explodes in anger.
Did you kill Melissa Northrup?
Colleen Reed! Melissa Northrup, you bastard! Vengeance is mine! Save the Lord! He's gonna get you!
I remember thinking to myself, this was the closest I've ever seen to a lynch mob. They wanted him so bad. I mean, he was absolutely hated up there.
When you hear the wails of the family members and the screaming, it was troubling. It was unsettling. That's what it was. It was just unsettling.
The marshals were really emotionally torn by this. They've got their man in custody, and they've got this crowd that wants to hang him. How they've been hunting for this man high and low and seen what he did to people, and now they have to protect him from frontier justice.
Mr. McDuff, do you have anything to say about the charges against you?
The story behind the abduction of Melissa Northrup had been reported over and over and over again, and it scared people. They also were aware of what had happened to Colleen Reed, in addition to the reporting that had taken place from what had happened way back in 1966. So all of these emotions boiled over, and they were angry, and they were screaming and yelling. It was a very frightening thing.
McDuff's attorney made clear that the accused killer does not want to talk to police.
McDuff returns to federal court here on Friday for an evidence hearing. Prosecutors say then they will reveal more information about his role in alleged killings. Sources say that the search of McDuff's Kansas City, Missouri apartment has yielded evidence in some of the cases, and that McDuff was trying to buy a gun and slept with butcher knives under his pillow.
After I did my last newscast that evening, everybody had left. Somebody came down and said, the marshals would like to see you up in their office in the federal courthouse. And I went up to the office, lots of marshals in there and other investigators, very quiet. Parnell McNamara has got this big wood frontier-style desk, and he leans across it and he said, I want you to read something. And he slides it across the desk. He said, this is the confession by Hank Worley, McDuff's accomplice in the murder of Colleen Reed. I'm not supposed to give it to you. You can't take it with you. But I want you to read it. And I sat there and read it.
Mac grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out. He had a girl by the throat. I could hear her gurgling. He lit a cigarette, he put it in her. He hit her so hard I could hear a loud crack like a big tree breaking.
This was horrific. This was unthinkable. I mean, it really took the breath out of me. And I could tell Parnell McNamara kind of had tears in his eyes. Like, whoa. And he leaned across that desk and just with his finger on that desk, tapping it, said, Robert, we got him. We've done our job. Now, by God, you get out there and you do your job. And you tell us how this monster got out of prison.